What's up, Las Vegas? Thank you guys for coming out today. I know it's a little warm today, but I have someone here to see you guys. So I just want to introduce myself really quickly. My name is Wesley. I'm a volunteer with Beto O Rourke. I am one of the first volunteers here in Las Vegas, so I want to welcome you guys here. So, can we all welcome my friend and the next President of the United States, Beto O Rourke.
Really appreciate it. This feels like, not the fact that I'm standing on something, but just being in your community feels like home, feels like El Paso to me. That 102 degree heat that is dry, so that when you're in the shade, we just stopped at a little park for a second to call home and check on everybody back in El Paso. It felt like being back home in the Chihuahuan Desert, where I'm from, in El Paso, Texas, connected to Ciudad Juarez, this community of immigrants, one of the most diverse cities in the country, and not unconnected to that, one of the safest places in the United States of America. And there's something about Las Vegas in that same sense, that our strength is not in just tolerating or respecting our differences, but fully embracing them, understanding that they are foundational to our strength, to our success, and yes, to our safety and our security as well. That is a message that the rest of the country needs to hear when you've got a commander-in-chief who wants to make us afraid of one another based on our differences. Somebody who called Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals. Someone who talks about 4 women of color, duly elected members of Congress, as some kind of threat to this country, and says, send them back. Where? In this country. This is open racism and hatred at its absolute worst. And it's not just offensive to us and to our sensibilities as Americans, it's fundamentally changing who we are as a country. Every single year, for the last 3 years, there's been a rise in hate crimes. On the day that the president signed his executive order seeking to ban Muslim travel to the United States of America, the mosque in Victoria, Texas, in my home state, was burned to the ground. Kids come up to me, 3rd grade child, Mexican American, says, why does my president not like me? And when I tell that story in Houston, Texas, a family comes up and says, that resonates in our house because our daughter, she's Muslim, thinks that she's in the wrong country. Though she was born here and we were born here, it wouldn't matter to me if they weren't and they came here as immigrants. Once you're here, you're just as American as anyone else. We can't be fearful, we can't be small, we cannot be weak. We are bold, confident, strong people. And I see that here in Las Vegas. This is our 3rd visit to the community. And I just left kind of an extraordinary visit with a home care worker. Now, she's got a number of clients that she sees all over this city. Drives from one home to the next, spends 2 or 3 hours with those that she cares for, is paid $11 an hour. She's got to make that stretch to cover her costs at home, the cost of the gasoline to get her from one appointment to the next, the wear and tear on her car, and she's literally the life or death difference for those with whom she spends her day. And so I was meeting one of her clients, this woman named Siobhan, who has a significant enough disability that she cannot take care of herself at home, can't wash her dishes, can't clean up after herself, can't live a life that many of us take for granted. And so April, this home care worker that I just spent the day with, she shows up and she does all this stuff for Siobhan. But what got me right in my heart was when Siobhan was talking about April, home care worker who helps her out. She says, look, she does all this wonderful stuff for me, but the best thing about her visit is that she's excited to see me. She smiles. She pretends that my jokes are funny. She makes me feel good about who I am, and that's really what's keeping me alive. And it reminds me when we were in Wichita Falls, Texas. We were knocking on doors, running for Senate at the time, and this woman answered her door. And she said, I don't really get out much. I'm not mobile, can't really take care of myself. In fact, I depend on a Meals on Wheels delivery. And the calories in that box ensure that I can sustain myself and live through to the next day. But she says what really keeps me alive is the gentleman who brings that box of food is the one human being I will see over the course of that day. And when he leaves and puts his hand on my shoulder to say goodbye, it is the one human touch or contact that I have in my life. She said, Beto, that's what's keeping me alive right now. And true to form, April, beyond advocating for other home care workers to make sure that they are paid a living wage, $15 as the floor, and we only go up from there. In addition to making sure that we have paid family leave so that she can take care of one of her 4 children, the youngest of whom is 3 years old, who she will not see until 11 o'clock or midnight because she has to work a second job just to make ends meet. She should be able to take time off of work with paid family leave to take care of those kids or herself or someone else. She should be able to rely on health care, not as a function of luck or privilege or circumstance, but a human right upon which she can depend. In addition to advocating for all of that, this economic justice that will involve every single American in the greatness of this economy, especially those who are on the outside looking in right now. She's also advocating for her clients, talking about long-term care, the bureaucracy, the red tape that they have to navigate right now in order to get the help that they need. She's not just advocating for herself or other members of SEIU or just people in Las Vegas, Nevada. She is advocating for all of us. And she says when everybody is successful, has a chance to participate in this economy, then everybody is going to enjoy the benefits. And this great economy will truly be great for everyone. She told me about her dad, who we got to meet, who was born in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico, who followed his dad to California where they had a bakery. He then became a baker for Vons, joined a union himself, the bakers and confectioners, and there were a couple of other industries involved, and told us that the power of joining a union was ensuring that you could advocate for better wages and better working conditions and better health care, but that you could advocate for your community and your country, reminding us that the way that we built the world's greatest middle class, the way that we built the world's greatest economy was the ability to organize, to form unions, to make sure that we can use our leverage, the value that we provide in the workplace to make this a better country for everyone. And oh, by the way, the fact that he decided and now here in Nevada, his very presence makes us stronger. A reminder that we have nothing to fear from immigrants. And the fact that we are safe communities is owing to the presence of those who were called to come here, who left their hometown, left their community, left their family, very often had to leave their language and culture behind as well, to come here to do better for themselves, to do better for their kids, but also to do better for all of us. And they have. We don't need to put kids in cages or build 2,000 miles of wall at a cost of $30 billion. We don't need to separate families. We can do the right thing, rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, free dreamers, more than 1 million strong, from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens in this the true country. And let's acknowledge this. There are millions more working the toughest, the hardest, sometimes the shittiest jobs in this country that no one else will take. And they travel thousands of miles for the privilege of making sure that we can feed ourselves or take care of ourselves. And sometimes, if lucky, paid $8.25 an hour, the minimum wage, or $7.25 an hour, the minimum wage in Texas, but all too often paid something far lower than that their immigration status used as leverage against them, kept in some kind of modern day bondage. They need to be able to come forward as well, register, get right with the government, and contribute even more to their success and our success as a country. Let's legalize America. And if we're going to do this, we're going to make sure that this economy truly works for everyone. If we're going to have health care that's guaranteed, high quality, universal, everyone who chooses to can enroll in Medicare. Everyone who's uninsured today automatically enrolled in Medicare. But as the culinary workers reminded me, if you have a health care plan that you fought for, that you like, that works for you and your family, you should be able to keep that in our plan. You will. If we're going to have immigration reform, if we're going to meet this singular existential crisis of climate change in the city that is warming faster than any other city in the United States of America. This is personal for you. This is personal for me. El Paso, Texas is warming second to you. Twice the global average right now. So much so that my 8-year-old son Henry said, "Dad, if you win this election, we're going to be able to stay in El Paso, right?" I said, "No, bud, the way this works, if we win the election, we're going to live in the White House in Washington, D.C. And Henry said, "But Dad, you told me." And don't judge me as a parent for what I told him, okay? He's 8 years old, but I told him, look, if we stay on this trajectory and we do not make a change right now, El Paso will no longer support human life. Sometime down the road, perhaps in your lifetime, these towns will completely dry up. And so he got it, and he said, if we win, then we'll be able to live in El Paso down the road because we will free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels. We'll embrace renewable energy technology. We'll put farmers in the lead by planting cover crops and pulling more carbon out of the air, keeping more of it sequestered in the soil. And we will take the lead internationally, convening the powers of the planet to do their part to keep us from warming another 2 degrees Celsius. If we're going to do this, we cannot do it by half steps. We cannot do it by half measures. And we cannot do it by half the country. We've got to involve every single one of us. No me importa what party you belong to whom you pray, whether you pray at all, who you love, and I hope you love somebody and you're loved by somebody as well. How many generations you can count yourself an American, or whether you just got here. What matters more than anything else at this moment is that before we are anything else, we are Americans first, and we have the opportunity of our lifetime to deliver for our country. So let's do this. Let's decide we're going to bring everyone in. Damn the differences. Don't allow them to divide us or to keep us from the greatness that could be ours here at this moment. And I'll close with this. The beginning of our day was this extraordinary roundtable here in Las Vegas with people who've been justice involved. They've been locked up, put behind bars, sometimes arrested for nonviolent drug crimes like possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal now, not just here, but in more than half the states in the union. Tonight, while we enjoy one another's company, this town hall, maybe a cold beer afterwards, there are 2.3 million people locked up behind bars, disproportionately comprised of communities of color who have been criminalized ever since the end of Reconstruction, down by law. This is not new. And so in addition to ending the federal prohibition on marijuana, in addition to expunging the arrest records for anyone caught in possession of something that is legal right now and that has medicinal value and that is helping people across this country lead better lives, in addition to cash bail and sentencing reform and ending for-profit prisons in this country, in addition to following your lead here in Nevada and restoring full voting rights for everyone who has served their time, paid their price, doesn't want that hung around their neck for the rest of their lives. Let's also do this. Let's make a deal with one another in this country that everyone matters, everyone counts, and everyone's story will be told. And the full story of the United States of America, in part predicated upon kidnapping people from another continent, a half a world away, bringing them here by force to build the wealth and the success of this country in the first place, and then denying their descendants any meaningful way of participating in this success, whether it's redlining or white nationalist terrorism or Jim Crow or segregation or suppression. It is manifest not just in our criminal justice system tonight, but in healthcare, in a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color, in an economy where there is 10 times the wealth in white America than there is in black America, in public education, where a 4 or 5-year-old child in a kindergarten classroom is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled if he or she is a child of color. Until we fully understand the full and true story of the United States and everyone's story in the United States, we will not be able to repair the damage done or stop visiting this injustice on future generations. Instead, let's make sure everyone is brought in, participates fully in this democracy, and is up to the greatest set of challenges we've ever faced. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how we're going to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. And that is how we bring this very divided, highly polarized country back together again. So thank you for being with us here tonight. I came not just to share with you why I'm running and the way in which we're running and what we want to accomplish once in office. I also came to listen to and learn from you. I have no ability to meet your expectations and fully serve you if I have not listened to you first. So Cynthia Cano right here has got a microphone. If you raise your hand, she'll bring that mic to you and we'll get you into the conversation.
I'm with AARP, and we know that many people cannot afford prescription drugs, and no one should have to choose between paying their rent and buying their prescriptions. What are you going to do about lowering prescription drugs?
Thank you for the question. We're going to get those prescription medications lowered for every single American. We'll begin by ensuring that you're allowed to purchase prescription medications from countries like Canada that sell them at the same high quality, but at a much lower rate. We'll also ensure that Medicare is allowed to use its purchasing power as leverage to drive down the cost of prescription medications. Inexplicable that right now, by law, we are prevented from doing that. Inexplicable unless you follow the money from the pharmaceutical corporations who buy not just influence, not just access, but outcomes when it comes to legislation and the price of these medications, which, to add insult to injury, you and I as taxpayers have already paid for many times over. The initial research and design and innovation, the clinical trials, the fact that we purchase them not just for Medicare beneficiaries, but Medicaid and TRICARE and VA beneficiaries as well. We should have the lowest drug prices in the world, not the highest. And as president, we will bring those.
So, mine's about education. Nevada has one of the lowest graduation rates in the country, and our Clark County School District is one of the worst. Everybody's talking about getting rid of college bills and free college. I want to know what you're going to do for early childhood education. I want to know what you're going to do to help the children to get into the colleges that everybody else wants to give them for free.
Thank you for asking. So, specific question, what are we going to do about early childhood education? We're going to make sure that school begins not at 4 or 5 years old when you're in kindergarten, but 3 or 4 years old when you're in pre-kindergarten in every single community in America. Not cheap, it's going to require an investment, but it will produce a handsome return over the lifetime of the beneficiary. They're more likely to finish high school, more likely to pursue higher education, more likely to earn more over the course of their life and pay more back in to the community that invested in them in the first place. I mentioned that in a kindergarten classroom, some kids are disproportionately punished and disciplined. In that same kindergarten classroom, some kids on the first day of school are already 10 months back in reading comprehension, 12 months back in math. When are they ever going to be able to press pause and catch up to the other kids in their class? You know the answer as well as I do, they never will. So let's move the starting line back, and let's also acknowledge that this is connected to other challenges we have. I mentioned that home care worker that I spent the day with won't get home until 11 or 12 o'clock. That means she does not have time to read to her son before the first day of kindergarten. She does not have that luxury that other families have. So a living wage, health care, being able to take your child to a therapist, having a community school where in addition to classroom instruction and free and reduced breakfast and lunch, there's mental health care, primary health care for that kid so he or she is well enough to learn. Y además, let's make sure that those classroom teachers and public school educators do not have to work a second or a third job just to make ends meet. Let's pay them a true living wage. In our administration, we are going to start a permanent education fund of $500 billion. The investment income from that, about $20 to $25 billion a year, goes to local school districts like the one in Clark to make sure that we have the resources to pay teachers what they deserve. We will complement that by fully funding the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA. Teachers have the support and resources they need. If we do all of that, I'm with you. I think we're going to be able to get much more, expect much more out of our public education system. Thanks for asking. Gotcha. Hi there.
Hi. So just this year, 7 states have banned abortion access and access to women's health care. To me, I need to know that my candidate has an extremely solid plan, not just to defend Roe v. Wade now, but after you're out of office. What is your plan to do that?
Yeah, great question. We were talking earlier about bringing everybody into the conversation. When we share the statistics, the facts, the lives that are affected by these policies, we see in a state like Texas, my home state, where the legislature has successfully closed about a quarter of our family planning clinics. We're at the epicenter of this maternal mortality crisis because not only have we functionally denied safe legal access to an abortion, we've denied access to a life-saving cervical cancer screening or family planning help, or in a state that refused to expand Medicaid, any kind of health care at all. It is a life or death issue. So not only must we appoint or nominate judges who understand that the 1973 Roe versus Wade decision is the settled law of the land, and we will do that. We must also complement that with legislation out of Congress that will not allow a state like Texas or Alabama or Missouri or any of them to exempt itself from the full legal rights for every person to make their own decisions about their own body, and then having a Department of Justice. That's right. Having a Department of Justice that is in every single courtroom across the country where this is being contested. So every branch of government, from judiciary to the legislative to the executive, making sure that we defend that right and make sure that we expand it where it is being diminished today. You've absolutely got it. And then you asked one important question. How are you going to do this even when you're not in office any longer? That also means that we support world-class candidates at the state legislative level, and especially women candidates who should be the future of this country to protect, safeguard, and expand. Thank you.
Hey, so what will you be doing if you win in 2020 to keep children safe in schools?
Thanks for asking the question. I'm going to follow the lead of young people who have brought the urgency to this issue that it had been lacking before. How do we explain to ourselves, how do we explain to the people of the future who will look back on this moment and say, how did you have 40,000 gun violence deaths in the United States of America? Were you inherently violent or evil or bad, or was there just something wrong with you all? Or was this a human-caused problem? And did the humans of America come together in order to solve it, not listening to corporations or special interest groups or the NRA, but listening to one another, listening to my kids coming home from school talking about active shooter drills. I don't want them worrying about that. I don't want their teacher worrying about that. I want them getting along with one another, having fun, learning, being the best possible person that they can be. One of the worst things I've ever heard was an interview with a student who survived the Santa Fe High School massacre in Santa Fe, Texas. And the reporter puts a microphone in front of her face in the aftermath of that slaughter and says, how shocking, how surprising was that someone walked into your school and just started killing your fellow students? And she said, you know what? I expected it was going to happen sooner or later. So look, what's the answer? Universal background checks. You close every loophole. The boyfriend loophole, which says that if you do not have a legal relationship with someone and they're beating you, they're violent towards you, they're threatening your life, right now that's not material. When you go to get that gun, we don't have any way of protecting you against them. We're going to close that loophole. The Charleston loophole that says if we have not done a background check in so many days, you can just have the gun and we'll just trust you. You're a good person. You're not going to hurt anybody with it. We're going to close that loophole. The gun show loophole, the internet loophole. Make sure that if you acquire a firearm in this country, you go through a background check. We're also going to make sure that weapons designed, engineered, sold to the United States military, because they're really good at killing people in great numbers very effectively and very efficiently, those stay on the battlefield and are not sold in our communities any longer. And you're going to be the reason that we do this. Any significant change that we have ever seen in this country, we sometimes give credit to who's president, to the people in Congress. It's the people who force the conversation, who are marching in the streets, who lead the marches for their lives, that make it happen. So I'm going to follow your lead on this, all right? Thank you for asking.
Beto, a question on veterans.
Yes, we'll bring the mic over to you. Yep.
Hi, I'm a nurse here in Las Vegas. And in 4 nights of debates, I watched them both sets of them. I heard every single Democratic candidate talk about increasing and strengthening the number of people on health insurance. But not one of you has talked about reinforcing the infrastructure that takes care of those patients. We need more nurses. In Las Vegas, we have a shortage of primary care doctors. We don't have enough facilities. So when everyone now has access to the system, how is the system supposed to take care of them?
Great question. Thank you. My sister is a nurse back in El Paso, and I know that she would be super proud of you for asking that question and ensuring that this is part of the conversation. You're absolutely right. And again, one of the things that I hope the people of the future will not be able to believe is that in order for you to become a nurse, you willingly took on debt that you had to pay back. Sometimes over the course of your working life, thousands, tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially those who become medical doctors. How are we doing this when we have a shortage of nurses and doctors and care providers in this country? We should make it easier, not harder, in order to do that. So to address the infrastructure, what if we said, or what if we expanded the public service debt forgiveness program? If you're willing to come back to an underserved community, and El Paso has a doctor to patient, maybe a nurse to patient ratio that is on par with Syria, not the United States of America. Medicare and Medicaid and private insurance reimbursement rates are so low, it's hard to get people to come there in the first place, and we're competing with too few nurses and doctors. So if we made it easier for you to afford your education in the first place, didn't allow you to take on debt in the first place, guaranteed debt-free college and master's degree education for lower and middle income Americans, and not just tuition, because we know that it's also room and board and books. And then if we incentivize, especially those underserved communities, by making sure that we wipe debt clear for those who've already accrued it, I think we begin to address the infrastructure problem that we have, create more residencies in the bargain, and just make sure that everyone has someone who can take care of them at their moment of need. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it. Yes. Hi.
I'm actually from El Paso myself. My name is Cesar Lopez. I'm the founder of Unified U.S. Deported Veterans. I have been trying to raise awareness on the deportation of military veterans for 6 years. I've been to Congress twice. You have signed a bill that I helped introduce to try to get us back. but none has happened in 6 years, and 10 men have died that I watched them die on the internet. I want those men back. What will you do as president to get all of us back home?
Yeah. Thanks for having me. First of all, thank you for your service. Thank you for helping to introduce that bill. I know that Salud Carvajal from California, Vicente Gonzalez from Texas have been champions on this as well, and I'm sure you've worked with them too. You put your life on the line for the United States of America. You should be able to stay in this country. You should have a fast path to citizenship. You should be able to go to the VA, get the care that you earn, that you deserve. Fewer than 1% of our fellow Americans have served in the armed forces since 9/11. And if you think about it, on their backs is the weight of the foreign policy that this country tries to execute all over the world, whether it's in Afghanistan tonight, or Iraq, or Somalia, or Yemen, or Syria, or Libya. If you're willing to do that, willing to risk losing your life, then I want to make sure that we give you every single right that you have earned back here in this country. And I think it's also important to tell the stories of those veterans in Tijuana or Ciudad Juarez or other parts of the world who should be here in this country, but also to tell the story of this country from its very foundation. The armed services have always been in some large part comprised of immigrants who wanted to do everything they could for this country. In El Paso, Texas, in World War I, an undocumented immigrant would be called a dreamer today, Marcelino Serna, joined the United States Army when the United States entered World War I, and his drill sergeant said, "Serna, you do not have to do this. Every man in this unit is going to France, but not every man in this unit will come back home alive." And Serna said, "Nope, this is my war, I'm going over." He came back from that war, the most highly decorated veteran from the state of Texas in all of World War I. And at a time that this country is trying to build walls with Mexico, the city of El Paso just dedicated a new international bridge to Juarez, and we named it after Marcelino Serna. So, yes.
And here we go, next question over here to your right on the floor.
There we go.
Sorry, stand if I could. First of all, I'd like to tell everybody, I am an immigrant. I was born in Frankfurt, Germany, and I didn't have half the problem getting into this country that a lot of my South American and Central American brothers and sisters are trying to do. Second thing is this question based off of the Planned Parenthood. I have been a professor in college. I taught human sexuality, but I am shocked at the number of college students who come in who don't know the first thing about their own bodies, including young ladies.
Exactly.
That's it.
When are we going to start mandating a sex education thing for kids, regardless of the religious influences in states like Utah where Mormons have a death grip on it? Our children are dying from diseases they don't have to. We need to do something about that.
Thank you for saying that. And making sure that everyone can make their own decisions about their own bodies and understand all the facts at a very early age. Amy and I, and mostly Amy, had the talk with our kids, and they're so young. Our oldest is 12 years old right now, but Amy wisely, following your lead, says, no, these are the conversations they're having in their schools right now. Some of this stuff is happening in school right now. I was 16 years old, 15 years old when my dad had the conversation with me. And the conversation literally consisted of him in his basement office opening a drawer full of condoms and telling me, I have no idea how many are in here. I've never counted them, so just know that these are here. That was it. That's it. You can go upstairs. I want to make sure that my sons respect themselves, respect their bodies, and respect others and the bodies of others. I want to make sure my daughter respects her body, others respect her body, and she respects the bodies of others, and that they always make intelligent, informed decisions for their well-being, for the well-being of others in their lives. So yes, let's get beyond the fear on this issue and make sure that every child can make those decisions and knows what is happening. So thank you very much for saying that. Appreciate that.
The other side of the room, here we go.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Francisco Miranda, I'm a organizer with the Teamsters Union here in Las Vegas. I'm out there organizing these non-union companies and talking to these people, and they're afraid. They're afraid to organize because their boss is going to fire them. What are you going to do to empower unions to their heyday, to make them better? Because once the union set the standard, everybody's wages go up, not just union wages.
Absolutely. That's right. You're absolutely right. So let's make sure that we vigorously enforce the laws that we have today, especially against employers who discriminate against union members or employees who would like to form unions right now. Let's make sure, and I know we have a challenge with the station casinos here in Las Vegas. You've got two of those casinos whose employees are trying to organize right now, and the ownership is slow walking them and preventing them from being able to do that. That's where you need executive leadership. It's where we've had it in the past. You're right, it's what's made America strong. Too many states are called right-to-work states. We got to make sure that whether it's Nevada or Texas, they become right to organize. That's right. And I, and everyone who cares about this, has to be able to talk to those who are not in unions today. And as you just said, make sure that they understand that the benefit accrues not just to the union member, but to every single person in this country. We're fighting for public service, public sector union members like AFGE. Those are the women and men who work at the VA, many of them veterans themselves. We've got to make the case, look, this is good not just for AFGE, not just their members. It's great for those veterans. We're going to get better care and better service. We want to make sure that we're doing right by them. That union is making it possible. So both in enforcing the law, both in ensuring, I was just with a home care worker today that I told you about, this administration is trying to make it impossible for those home care workers to organize, to be able to deduct union dues from Medicare reimbursements. We've got to be able to do that if they're going to have the leverage they need to be able to earn more and then to be able to deliver better care. That client that I met with today, she said that it's hard to have the same home care worker because they can't afford the job. They're in it for a few months, realize they can't make ends meet, and then they split. She's going to be better taken care of when you have a worker who can afford the job that they're in. So yes, let's stand up for unions because we're standing up for America and everyone in this economy by doing that. Thank you.
Las Vegas. This is actually the heart of the Latino community right here, so thank you for coming. My name is Laila. I'm a local. I've been here for 30-some years, and I'm a HUD-approved counselor. I'm an advocate for housing. I think a lot of the things that my fellow brothers and sisters brought up today is important to mention that housing is the #1 thing that will help with everything. Children do better in school when they have their own home. Seniors do better when they own their own property. Their health is better when they can get to stay home. I work for an organization named NACA, so if you'd like to. We're a non-profit, we're a not-for-profit company. We offer a program that allows people to get into a house without any down payment, 0 down payment, no lender closing costs. We have advocated with the banks to cover their own closing costs. So they don't have to pay thousands of dollars to buy a house with us. We're, again, a non-profit. We're working to try to get low to moderate affordable people into housing. My question to you is, currently, a lot of the banks have to meet CRA credits. In order to take deposits from the communities, they have to have a community reinvestment program for people to be able to purchase homes. So a lot of the banks right now are taking advantage and coming up with some funny-looking programs that are actually not community reinvestment. They don't help the community, they help themselves. We would like to find out what is your plan in regards to addressing the housing shortage and affordability, which is the #1 thing that currently makes most of the community in Vegas not be able to purchase a home because we're priced out of the housing market.
Thank you for the work that you're doing, for the question on this. Let's make sure that we help with rental assistance programs for those who, are just one financial crisis, one missed paycheck away from not being able to meet their rent, or are seeing their rents go up as their pay has stagnated over time. Let's make sure that there are more affordable rental units, so increasing the rental housing stock. But then you mentioned first-time home buyers and down payment assistance. I also want to make sure that wherever possible, when you're paying at the end of each month, you're building equity by paying mortgage and owning something that you can pass on to the next generation, that you can borrow against to start a small business and create wealth and opportunity in your community for others. So we're going to double the size of the community development financial institution funding, make more of that credit accessible to more of the community. We're going to double the size of the first-time homebuyer down payment assistance program, again, to make sure that more people can get into a home, especially those in communities of color who've been redlined out of home ownership over much of the history of the United States. I want to make sure that they are building wealth also in this country. And then perhaps last thing, and it's a connection of local government and state government and federal government. Let's make sure that there are more federal dollars in addition to those that I just described, expanding the community development block grant program that can be used to increase the stock of affordable housing, but then ask local governments to make sure that we have inclusionary zoning policies so that we don't segregate affordable housing in just some parts of the community, that you can afford to live near where you work and are not driving 1 or 2 or 3 hours just to get to that job. If everyone can have a chance to live in a community that is right for them, that's going to be affordable for them, it's going to be better for the community, and our country is going to be stronger as a consequence.
But here's the thing, when you force the banks to actually do community reinvestment, don't spend the people's money. The banks they don't have to charge for an appraisal, they don't charge for an underwriter, they don't have to charge for any of those things. Our program doesn't charge the consumer any of those things. Our banks have said, if you do the loan, we will pay for all of the closing costs. The member doesn't have to pay. So when can we actually have some kind of a policing for the banks to actually start doing programs that are community reinvestment instead of spending more money?
Well, let's make it conditional on the investment. If we're going to give those banks the opportunity to do that, let's follow your lead and make sure that they're making it affordable for their customers, for the people in the community. I know that you shared your contact information with Cynthia. Okay, or you'll get it. So I'd love to learn more about this and find out how you've had success, see how we apply that nationally. Thank you.
Great. As many people as I can. Bienvenido. Gracias por venir. Mi nombre es Lupe. I am the daughter of a migrant, a single mother that many, many years ago decided that she was going to cross the border like with a coyote. I am a teacher.
Yay,
For 20
teacher.
years. I have 2 children in college. I have one that's graduating and going to service. So my thing is, don't tell us that we don't contribute.
That's right.
Thank you.
For 20 years, I have contributed to many, many students that have come through my classroom and now are productive citizens in our country and are donating dollars everywhere. Okay? Now, I heard what you were going to do with the border. My thing is, I wasn't quite clear when you said it during the debate. And a lot of people were attacking each other and all this. I want you to please explain it to me one more time so that I can be clear. Because some of them want to penalize them, some of them don't, some of it. Could you please clarify so that we can be clear on that? Because I'm kind of stuck on that.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, if you come to this country and you come to a port of entry and claim asylum, we're going to follow our laws and allow you to make that claim, and you're going to go through due process. If you cross in between ports of entry, perhaps as your mother did, as tens of thousands are doing right now, in part because we haven't allowed them to enter this country at our ports of entry, in my administration, we will not criminally prosecute you. And in fact, we will rewrite the law, Section 1325 of our immigration code, to ensure that anybody seeking asylum or refuge or shelter or safety in this country, they're at their most vulnerable, their most desperate moment, they should not have to fear being detained in an hilera or a border patrol station in a cinder block cell, sleeping on a concrete floor. They should not fear their child being caged or the mom or dad being deported back to Guatemala or Honduras or El Salvador. We will keep that family together. We will keep them in this country, not in detention, but in a community care program for a fraction of the cost, restoring our humanity and ensuring that that family is okay, because that family is your family. They're my family. The O'Rourkes coming here in the 19th century, fleeing famine in Ireland that claimed more than 1 million lives. They're almost everyone's family in this country. So we're going to make sure that we remember that, and our traditions and our values are expressed in our laws and our practices. Pero además, we're going to make sure that the 9 million green card holders here in this country, many in Nevada, we waive their citizenship fees. We mail them already filled out citizenship application forms, make them U.S. citizens, and make them undocumented who are living in constant fear, maybe only leaving their home to go to their job and to come back home, lest they be apprehended by an immigration and customs enforcement agent. I want to make sure that they too can come forward, that their status is legalized. And then we'll also go to the countries, especially those in the Northern Triangle, that are making the god-awful decision to send their children on that 2,000-mile journey, invest in violence reduction, work with local stakeholders, acknowledge that Guatemala has an historic drought right now, caused not by God nor by Mother Nature, but by all of us. This climate change, the emissions, the excesses, the inaction in the face of the facts and the science, we have some culpability. So let's make sure that we're helping them out, and in so doing, less reasons for them to have to flee to this country. In other words, we're going to rewrite our laws to make you proud, to remember who we are at the end of the day and what has made us great in the first place. So I hope that that clears that up. No criminal prosecution for families. We're going to end for-profit detention centers on our border, as well as for-profit prisons in our country. We're going to be proud. We're going to be proud of how we treat one another. So
That's not enough.
All right,
That's not enough.
here, I'm going to give you the microphone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Vicente Montoya, and I started working in immigration law in 1976. And I worked in that until I retired about 6 years ago. What you have said is incorrect. People who are applying for asylum are not being prosecuted or should not be prosecuted because they are applying at the port of entry. They don't qualify to be separated from their families. However, you have people who are having illegal entry into the United States. That was never utilized in all the years that I was working until just a few years ago. And in fact, it was not a criminal offense, it was a civil offense. And we have to acknowledge, when I was doing all that work, people went into deportation proceedings. And then about 8 years ago, they decided to change the law so that somebody who is deported and then returns and has an illegal entry is then prosecuted and serves 5 years hard time in a federal facility. This was perfect for the Department of Justice. You could rack up an incredible resume. All you had to prove was that you had that deportation and the person came in. You got them. You have the order. It was an automatic conviction. They were convicting people wholesale in a federal court. You would have 25, 30 people, boom, convicted, 5 years. That's an incredible cost to the United States government. Prison, 5 years, federal prison. How much is it for each person? Those are billions of dollars that we've spent. And since they started this process of prosecuting, changing their system, starting about 8 years ago, we have gone from prosecuting white-collar crime to prosecuting these easy prosecutions where people can rack up these incredible records of almost 100% wins. We've suffered. We, the American public, have suffered. We're spending tons of money, and we're not really going after the real criminals. To say that we need to still have criminalization, it's wrong. It doesn't work. There was a net immigration that was going on. People were returning before Trump came into office. And then all of a sudden now, we have this huge increase. This system of criminalization is not working. People are still coming. Having that penalty is not going to stop them. We have yet to say, what is it driving people from their homes to come here? Never in the whole time that I have my career has anyone ever addressed it in any administration. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter who. It's been a football that people have played with, and they have never addressed the root cause. And the only plan that I've heard so far, and I was amazed, was Julian Castro, his Marshall Plan, to really get at the root cause. People want to stay in their homes. The people that I represented did not want to be in the United States. They wanted to be with their families, but they wanted to be able to put food on the table and not be a donkey. Because I talked to refugees from El Salvador, and they said until they went to a refugee camp, they never knew that all they could do was just wake up in the morning, go work in the fields, eat, come back, go to sleep. It wasn't until they were able to see that they had more worth. So to be able to educate people there, to be able to give them opportunity, they don't want to come here. And we need to do something. And criminalizing entry doesn't work.
Yeah,
and
I
people
agree.
can't, they do not have the process to be able to take all those people applying for refugee status. It's not happening.
Yeah. Thank you. Look, I agree with you. You called for doubling what we are spending in the Northern Triangle countries of Central America, having the humility of understanding that not everybody wants to be in this country or be a U.S. citizen. Almost no one wants to leave their hometown or their family or their country. They have pride just like I have pride in my country. In most instances, they feel like they are forced to do that. They have no other option, especially if they're leaving the most violent places on the face of the planet, places that did not become the most violent places on their own. When we got involved in the civil wars in El Salvador, in Nicaragua, and used Honduras as basically an aircraft carrier for our involvement. When we got involved in Guatemala in the 1950s, overthrew a democratically elected president, Jacob Arbenz Guzman, with the CIA. The half-life on that we are still experiencing today. When we criminalized people, locked them up, and then sent them back to their home countries after they had served their time, bringing gang culture from our prisons back to countries where there was no experience in that, we helped to create this. When we're the largest illegal drug market on the face of the planet, 25% of the consumption, though we are 4% of the population. And we've chosen to criminalize not just the users, but have a war on drugs. It's a war on people, and the people who are bearing the brunt are in Mexico, in Guatemala, in Honduras, and El Salvador. I'm with you on this. We've got to address the root causes, and I want to do that. And I also want to make sure that if you want to work in this country, there is a lawful, orderly, safe path for you to do that. If you want to join your family, we ask you to get in a line right now. That line stretches 20 or 25 years long. I want to make sure that we bring that line down so that you can immediately join your family. A lawful, orderly, safe process to do that. If you want to flee, persecute. What's that?
There's no line for the people. There's no line for the people.
And in some cases, there is no line for the people. You're absolutely right.
For at least 90% of them.
You're absolutely right. Try to come here from the Philippines. Try to come here from Mexico. It's almost impossible to do that right now. So when I talk about rewriting our immigration laws in our own image, it is to reflect everything that you and I are talking about. So I agree with you, and I want to get to the root causes, and I want to make sure that we are proud of what we're doing here in this country. Thank you.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Meadow, and I also do plan on running for president in the year 2036. So Vegas, there's a local union called the IBEW 357 for electrical workers, and my dad is like constantly laid off. So I want to ask, like, what would you do for us for that issue happening here, especially here in Nevada?
And I'm sorry, you said your dad's a member of IBEW, and then he's constantly
Laid off.
laid off. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I've listened to IBEW, I've listened to the carpenters, I've listened to trades here in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and they've come up with a really great idea to try to address this. They said, look, we're going to have to spend money on infrastructure, on roads and bridges, on our schools, on making sure that we fully embrace renewable energy technology. What if there was a guarantee that those jobs, as we invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the future of this country, that some large percentage of them are union jobs? And that if we agree that in addition, some large percentage of those union jobs are first-year apprentices, so that we have a way, debt-free, to be able to learn a skill or a trade that you can command for the rest of your life, earn a living wage for the rest of your life, live with dignity and purpose for the rest of your life, and then make sure that there's a commitment for this country for the rest of your life, so you don't have to face those layoffs from time to time, or have to travel outside of the state in order to find work. It gets back to the question we were asked earlier. We also have to make sure that Nevada ultimately becomes a state where you have a right to organize, and change that from a right to work state. That helps your dad, that helps the state, that helps this country, that helps our economy. Thanks for asking.
Okay, I'm sorry if we didn't get to you. This is going to be our last question.
Yes, good evening. There's an issue that has no constituency in this country to speak of, and they don't vote, they can't speak for themselves, they can't make campaign contributions. And it's our wildlife species and our domestic animals. They are shamelessly used and abused by the federal government, by hunters and trappers who are looking for trophy hunting. We have wild horses in this state that are chased down by helicopters, put in prison, and then sent to slaughterhouses when it's inconvenient for the government to keep them. They do a horrible job of managing our wildlife. None of the candidates have said anything about this, and I'd be curious, and I looked at your website, I did not see anything there. I'd be curious to know your perspective and how you would choose to address that issue if you were president.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. You know, on the specific issue of these wild horses, I think as a member of Congress, I joined legislation to try to prevent the practices that you just described. But you are going to know far more about this issue than I do, so I would love to be able to have your guidance and follow your lead on this. I'll make sure that we get your information. Also, as a member of Congress, I sought to expand our protected public lands to make sure that we had the habitats and the environments that we will otherwise lose, and not just lose the vistas, the views, and the hiking paths, but lose the species that call those places home. You probably saw the UN report that says that we will lose more than 1 million species in the lifetimes of some of the people who are here and alive today in this country, unless we take a dramatically different turn right now. So in addition to the humane treatment of animals, with which I agree, I want to make sure that we also maintain their habitats and this planet. That's why climate and confronting climate change was the first policy proposal that we outlined in this campaign, mobilizing $5 trillion in order to do that, ensuring that we stop oil and gas exploration on our federal lands and our coastal and protected waterways. That's going to do a lot to protect those species and to even expand their habitats. So again, would love to follow your lead on some of the more specific issues, especially here in Nevada, but that's been my commitment as a member of Congress. It's my commitment to you as a candidate for the presidency. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. We're going to take these 2 questions, okay? I want to make sure I do my best to listen to everyone. Sorry. You've had your hand up the whole time. You've had your hand up. So if you can make them brief, I'll try to be brief in my response. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking
course.
time for this question. It's a follow-up on that and on the environment. I did see that you do support natural gas as a bridge fuel to renewable energy. But I did see in your climate plan that you do acknowledge that the methane that leaks from fracking is just as potent as coal. And we do have to frack for natural gas. So my question is, once you become president, are you going to turn away from natural gas and instead keep it in the ground and use that full investment to renewable energy and a just transition?
Yes. As quickly as we possibly can. We've set a goal that we will be net zero greenhouse gas emissions no later than 2050. That we'll be halfway there by 2030. And the only way to do that is to embrace wind and solar and the next generation of wind and solar and the battery technology that allows us to distribute wind and solar even when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. And though I come from an oil and gas state, I also come from the largest producer of wind energy. And we made that investment, Republicans and Democrats alike. So you're absolutely right. There may be a transition time, but if we do not fully embrace renewable energy, leave fossil fuels behind, we will not make it. And as the father of 3 kids, I know that my kids will not make it, and I fear their judgment at the end of the day. So I want to make sure that we do everything humanly possible to meet that goal. Thank you for asking.
This is the third meeting that we meet with you over here to follow you and see what the inputs that you have for our public. Just 3 questions really quick. Are you going to impeach Kavanaugh if you are president?
No.
Are you going to impeach Mitch, the McConnell?
No. I just want to give you quick answers, but no and no.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. The last question is, when I started working, I was maybe 60 years old, and I worked all through my life. The increase in retirement went from 65 to 67 years old. Now, are you be able to make from 67 to 65 like it was before? And the reason is because a lot of people retire earlier, and then you get your full credits when you're 65. Are you be able to do that?
Yeah. Yes, so if the question is, do we want people to be able to retire at the age that when they enter the workforce, they were promised that they would be able to do so, yes, they've paid in every single working day to the Social Security Trust Fund. We also know that on this current trajectory, unless we change course, we won't be able to pay out 100 cents on the earned dollar of benefits. So we'll also sign into law the Social Security 2100 Act, which says that right now we tax for Social Security up to $133,000. Every dime, every $1 million more that you make over that is not taxed. We will change that so that the very wealthiest and the highest income earners are paying this. Thank you all. We're going to have to call it a night there. It was very great.